today we are the Group 1 of CAF2 Botany that is instructed by Miss Maljuan B. Dizon. In this performance, we are going to discuss the steps in scientific method with concrete examples. That's my topic, or that's my part. Number 2 is the fundamental tenets of scientific method with examples that will be discussed by Mr. Raymar Espanol. Number 3 is the clear comparison between scientific theory and scientific law that will be discussed by Miss Christine Caliente. Let's go. So, what is scientific method? Scientific method is a process or a series of steps that allows a person to arrive at tested and proven answers. The sequence of these steps also allows the conclusion or answer to be double-checked or be validated by others. So, that is the meaning of scientific method. So, what are the steps in making scientific method? Number 1 is the observation and identification of the problem. So, to observe means to be aware of one's surroundings by using any or all of the 5 senses. Example is this is the example. Jovi noticed crushed eggshells in the pots of orchids in his father's garden. He asked his father why this was so, and was told that the eggshell serves as fertilizers to the plants. Jovi researched on the compositions of eggshells and found out that they contain minerals which plants can use to grow healthily. He also observes that the orchid's leaves in the gardens are dark green in color. He wants to find out if his father is correct. That is our examples in observation. Number 2, fundamentals of hypothesis. Once the problem has been identified, an intelligent and calculated possible answer of the problem is given. That is known as the hypothesis. So the example of this step is Javi guessed that orchids with eggshells will have greener leaves than those without eggshells because as the eggshells decompose, minerals in the shells and in the membrane will provide nutrients to the growing orchids. Greener leaves mean the orchids are healthy. So number 3 method. What is number 3 method? It is the testing the hypothesis. After the hypothesis is formulated, some tests will nullify or verify if it are necessary. An experiment is done under controlled conditions in order to test the hypothesis. The reliability and validity of the experiment depend on certain factors or variables that can influence its outcome. Variables are components in an experiment that are either maintained or changed to check the validity of the result. Example: Javi asked his father to help him prepare the greenhouse to conduct the experiment. They went to an orchid dealer and purchased 10 pots of orchids of the same variety, size, and age. Upon arriving home, Javi placed 5 pots of orchids in the left corner of the greenhouse and another 5 pots in the right corner. He made an initial record of the appearance of the orchid's leaves in his logbook. His father helped him collect a container full of eggshells, and they crushed and contributed them equally among the 5 pots in the right corner. All the orchids were taken care of in the same way for the next 45 days. Javi's plan was to observe them every 5 days. Number 4 step is the collection or the interpretation of data. During the experiment process, observation from both the experimental and control groups are recorded as raw data of the experiment. These data are subjected to analysis, often using statistical tools to derive the results of the experiment. For example, Javi noticed after 45 days that the leaves of the orchids with eggshells are darker green in color than those without eggshells as the experiment was progressing. Even if its initial observation did not manifest any change, the succeeding observation started to show changes in the color of the orchid's leaves. So number 5 is the stating the conclusion or the conclusion or the end or the answer of all the hypotheses or that's the outcome of the experiment. So what is the conclusion? What is conclusion? Conclusion is a statement that answers the scientific problem based on the result of the experiment. It is a product of a carefully planned and tested experiment. How it is conclusion different from a hypothesis? The conclusion is already a proven answer based on the results of the experiment, while a hypothesis is just a guess that will need to be tested. The conclusion either verifies or nullifies the formulated hypothesis made at the start of the investigation. So the example is that eggshell can be used as fertilizer for some varieties of orchids as shown with the greener color of their leaves. So this is the end of my topic. So let's listen to Mr. Raymar Espanyo for his discussion about the fundamental tenets of scientific method.
Hello everyone, I am Raymar Espanyo and I will going to discuss about the fundamental tenets of scientific method and their examples. The first fundamental tenets of scientific method is source of information. It says that the information must be all accepted. It must derive from carefully documented and controlled observations. Information coming press, prophets, or even from scientists cannot be accepted automatically or directly if needs proofs, verify if it's time. For example, for all hundreds of years, medicine was taught using a text called Mathina Medica, written by Galen, a Roman physician. In early 1500 Celsius, Andreas Vesalius began dissecting human corpses and noticed that in many cases, Galen had been mistaken. Vesalius promoted that idea that observation of the world itself was more accurate than accepting undocumented claims, even if the claims had been made by an extremely famous and respected person. So it means not all extreme person or a respected person gives us a source of information that is time and acceptable. Phenomena that can be studied, only tangible phenomena and objectives are studied, such as near plants, minerals, and weather. We cannot see or feel magnetism or neutrons, but we can construct instruments that detect them. Reliability in contrast. We do not see or feel ghosts, and no instrument has ever detected ghost reliability if ghosts do exist. They must be intangible and cannot be studied by the scientific method. Anything that cannot be observed cannot be studied. Number 3. Constancy and universality. Physical forces that cannot control the world are constant, though time and are the same everywhere. Water has always been and always will be composed of hydrogen and oxygen. Gravity is the same now as it has been in the past. The world itself changes, mountains erode, rivers change course, plants evolve, but the force remain the same. Experiments done at one time and place should give the same result if they are carefully repeated at a different time and place. Constancy and universality allows us to plan future experiments and predict what the outcome should be. If we do the experiment and do not get the predicted outcome, it must be that our theory was incorrect, not that the fundamental force of the world have suddenly changed. For example, if someone claims that a new drug cures a particular disease, we can check that by testing the same drug against that disease. If it does not work, the first person may have, number 1, made an innocent mistake. Number 2, tested the drug on people who will give gotten better anyway. And 3, been committing found. However, we do not have to worry that the difference in the two experiments is due to the fundamental laws of chemistry and physics having changed. And last fundamental tenets of scientific method is basis. This fundamental basis of scientific method is the principle of never being certain of a conclusion, of always being willing to consider new evidence. No matter much evidence there is more for or against theory, it does no harm to keep a bit of doubt in our minds and to be willing to consider more evidence. For example, there is a tremendous amount of evidence supporting the theory that all plants are composed of cells, and there is no known evidence against it. All of our research, all of our teaching assumes that plants indeed are composed of cells, but the concept of skepticism requires that if new contrary evidence is presented, we must be willing to change our minds. Another example, consider people who have been convicted of crimes and then later, often years later, DNA-based evidence indicates that they are innocent. Skepticism is the willingness to consider new evidence.
Good day everyone, I am Christine Gagenti and my task in this video is to give a clear comparison between scientific theory and scientific law. According to the research, scientific theories and scientific laws perform different functions. Theories are explanations of natural phenomena. They aren't predictions. Although we may use theories to make predictions, but they are explanations as to why we observe something. The theories are unlike to change. They are well supported and able to adequately account for a number of observations. Indeed, theories can be true. Although it can happen, changing a theory takes time and effort. A hypothesis must be unable to explain numerous observations or pieces of data in order to change. Speculation are not theories. In science, the phrase "just a theory" has no place. It carries a lot of weight to be a scientific theory. It is not just a person's opinion about anything. Similar to scientific theories, scientific laws are guiding principles that can be utilized to forecast how the natural world will behave. Observations and/or experimental findings often provide strong support for both scientific rules and ideas. Scientific laws typically relate how nature will react under specific circumstances. Specific theories provide more comprehensive explanations of how nature functions and why it displays particular traits. Comparatively, theories describes what happens, but laws explain what we observe, the things we do. A widespread misperception is that scientific theories are fundamental concepts that will eventually evolve into scientific laws as more data and proof collect. A theory does not become a scientific law when additional or better evidence gathers. Remember that theories are explanation and laws are patterns found in huge amount of data that are typically expressed as an equation. A theory will always be a theory, and a law will always be a law.